Welcome to your deep dive. Today we're diving deep into contemporary romance, specifically your contemporary romance. You sent us excerpts and character profiles from your novel draft, and you want to know if they have potential. To help us break it all down, we have expert speaker who's analyzed countless romance narratives and can spot what sizzles and what fizzles. I'm excited to get started.
Looking forward to it. There's nothing like that energy of a new story unfolding.
Okay, let's unpack this. First, you've given us four main characters,
Hmm.
Anya, Ben, Lily, and David. It's interesting that they're all roughly in their late 20s to early 40s, but what really stands out is that they're all connected in some way.
What's fascinating here is this web of pre-existing relationships. Anya and Ben are best friends, which creates that foundation of trust and history. But then she also works for David, the older man figure. Right away, we see the potential for both comfort and conflict.
It definitely seems like a recipe for some delicious drama. And speaking of drama, let's talk about Anya. Her move from London to LA is a big deal, not just geographically, but for her character arc. How can the writer use the LA setting to create romantic opportunities that London might not have offered?
Los Angeles is a city of reinvention, full of ambition and a fast-paced lifestyle. Think about those rooftop parties, chance encounters at trendy yoga studios, or maybe even a romantic connection forged over a shared love of surfing. The key is to weave the city's energy into the narrative, letting it influence Anya's journey.
Okay, let's delve deeper into the characters themselves, starting with Anya. We know she's driven and wants to empower other women, but the source material also mentions she fears failure and desires success. Are these desires believable for her, and how can the writer make them feel unique to Anya and not just generic character traits?
It's important to remember that while everyone fears failure and desires success, those feelings manifest differently in each individual. What are Anya's specific goals? What experiences have shaped her fear of failure? Maybe it stems from a past setback in her career or personal life. By digging into her backstory and motivations, the writer can make these universal desires feel deeply personal.
Now let's move on to Ben. His profile screams alpha male, driven, ambitious, potentially arrogant. The source material even mentions he needs to learn to balance ambition with his personal life. This archetype is incredibly popular in romance, but what are the pitfalls the writer needs to avoid?
The allure of the alpha male is undeniable, but the writer needs to go beyond that surface-level charm. Think about those quiet moments where Ben's guard drops. Maybe he reveals a hidden passion for poetry or struggles to express his emotions. These glimpses of vulnerability will make him more than just a cliché.
So we need to see the man beneath the alpha mask. This raises an interesting question. How do you think Anya's focus on empowering other women might clash or complement Ben's alpha tendencies? Could this create some compelling conflict?
Absolutely. It's a recipe for some fireworks. Anya's commitment to empowering women might challenge Ben's traditional notions of masculinity. Does he see her work as a threat to his ego, or is he inspired by her passion and drive? This tension could force them both to confront their beliefs and potentially lead to some powerful character growth.
Now, about Lily, Anya's roommate and coworker, she seems to mirror Ben in her ambition and fear of failure. Is this parallel too obvious, or could it create an interesting dynamic between them?
Parallel character arcs can be tricky. If they're too similar, it becomes repetitive. But if the writer uses those similarities to create contrast, we can see how each character tackles the same challenges differently. Perhaps Lily's ambition stems from a need to prove herself, while Ben's is rooted in a desire for control. These subtle differences can make their interactions more nuanced and intriguing. Perhaps they could even become each other's support system, finding solace and understanding in their shared struggles.
So competition could turn into collaboration. I like that. Okay, let's talk about David. He's the oldest of the group, successful and described as having a reputation. We also know he's Anya's boss. How can the writer handle this age gap and power dynamic without making it cliche or problematic?
Age gap romances can be tricky, especially when there's a power imbalance involved. The key is to ensure mutual respect and understanding. The writer needs to show us David's genuine admiration for Anya's talent and drive not just her looks or her position in the company. We need to see his vulnerabilities and what he finds appealing about Anya beyond the superficial.
Instead of just lust or a power play, we need to see a genuine connection. Now, you mentioned earlier that making these characters stand out from typical romance tropes is crucial. What are some specific examples of quirks, passions, or backstories the writer could give them to make them feel unique?
Think about details that reveal their individuality. Maybe Anya collects vintage postcards reflecting her love of travel and history. Ben could secretly write poetry contrasting his tough exterior with a sensitive soul. Lily might be a coding whiz in her spare time, showcasing a hidden talent that sets her apart. These small touches make them more than just cardboard cutouts fulfilling a role.
Those little details are like sprinkles on a cupcake. They add that extra bit of delight and make you remember them long after you finished. Okay, we've got a solid grasp on the characters, but how about the plot points? The listener sent a few excerpts, starting with a seemingly classic meet cute on a plane.
Ah, the meet cute. It's a staple of the romance genre for a reason. It creates instant intimacy and that sense of shared adventure. In this case, Anya and Ben connect over The Catcher in the Rye.
But isn't that a big cliche? They bond over a book on a plane. How can the writer make this scene feel fresh and memorable?
It's not just about the setting or the object, it's about the meaning behind it. The Catcher in the Rye deals with themes of alienation, searching for authenticity, and rebelling against societal expectations. This choice of book suggests that Anya and Ben are both at a point in their lives where they're questioning who they are and what they want. It hints at a deeper connection beyond just a shared love of literature.
So the book acts as a symbol of their shared yearning for something more. That's a clever way to add depth to a seemingly simple encounter. Okay, what about the other excerpt, the one where Anya has a potential run-in with David at a speakeasy? Is this too much too soon?
Introducing a second love interest early on can be risky, but it can also create that delicious tension that keeps readers hooked. The speakeasy setting is intriguing too. It hints at mystery, a sense of the forbidden, and perhaps even a shared love of adventure.
So we've got a classic meet cute, with Ben full of shared vulnerability and intellectual connection, and then a potential spark of intrigue with David in a clandestine setting. That's a great setup for a love triangle. But before we dive into that, I want to touch on something really interesting. You mentioned that Anya's work involves empowering other women. How can this theme be woven into the romance plot without feeling forced or preachy?
This is where the writer can get really creative. Maybe Anya meets one of her love interests through her work, or perhaps her passion for social justice inspires them to reevaluate their own priorities. The key is to show, not tell. Let Anya's work be more than just a job. Let it be a reflection of her values and a driving force in her life.
So her work becomes a lens through which we see her relationships.
Yes.
That's a powerful way to add depth and meaning to the romance. All right, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part, but we're just getting started. We'll be back after a quick.
Actually, we're going to keep diving right in. We've got more excerpts to discuss, and I'm eager to see what other romantic possibilities unfold. Let's take a closer look at the excerpts you've sent, focusing on how they develop the characters and their relationships. The source material jumps around a bit, which can make it hard to follow the timeline. Instead of trying to force it into chronological order, let's focus on each character's individual journey.
That sounds like a great plan. It's like putting together a puzzle. We need to examine each piece before we can see the whole picture.
Exactly. Let's start with Anya. There are moments in the excerpts where she seems apprehensive about her move to LA. It's like she's excited for a fresh start, but also worried about leaving behind the familiar.
It's understandable to feel that way when you're uprooting your life and moving to a new city. How can the writer use those anxieties to add depth to Anya's character?
Those unspoken fears and doubts are gold for a writer. They give us a glimpse into Anya's vulnerabilities, making her more relatable and human. Is she running towards something amazing in LA or running away from something in London? Those questions add layers to her character and make us want to learn more about her motivations.
It's like there's a hidden story beneath the surface, and we're just getting glimpses of it.
Okay.
Speaking of glimpses, the excerpts also hint at a potential romantic connection between Anya and Ben. They bond over The Catcher in the Rye on the plane, then they're holding hands during a walk in LA. It seems like things are moving pretty quickly.
That accelerated timeline can be a deliberate choice. Perhaps the writer wants to capture that whirlwind feeling of instant connection, of throwing caution to the wind when you meet someone who just gets you. On the other hand, it's important to make sure the emotional progression feels believable, even if the timeline is condensed.
So it's a balancing act between capturing that initial spark and making sure the relationship develops in a way that feels authentic. I'm curious, though, the source material also mentions a potential encounter between Anya and David at a speakeasy. Isn't that introducing too many love interests too fast?
Multiple love interests can create a lot of tension and keep the reader guessing, but it's important to handle them carefully. In this case, the speakeasy setting is intriguing because it adds a layer of mystery and allure to David. If the encounter is brief, a spark of recognition that leaves Anya intrigued but uncertain, it could be a great way to introduce a potential rival for Ben's affections without overwhelming the reader.
It's like planting a seed of doubt in Anya's mind. Is she really falling for Ben, or is she drawn to the mystery and excitement of David?
Exactly. And that creates conflict both internally for Anya and within the dynamics of the potential love triangle.
Now, I want to bring back Anya's work empowering women because it seems like a key part of her identity. One excerpt describes her helping a woman named Lily escape an abusive marriage. This is heavy stuff, but it shows Anya's compassion and desire to make a difference. How can the writer connect this theme to the romance without it feeling preachy or forced?
It's all about finding those organic connections. Maybe Anya's work brings her into contact with one of her love interests in a way that goes beyond their initial attraction. Perhaps Ben volunteers at a women's shelter, showing a shared commitment to social justice. Or maybe David have a personal connection to the issue of domestic violence, revealing a hidden vulnerability. The key is to show, not tell. Let Anya's work be a reflection of her values and a driving force in her life, and let the romance develop organically from there.
It's like her passion for social impact becomes a litmus test for her relationships. Does the guy support her, challenge her, or try to control her? Those reactions reveal a lot about their character and compatibility.
Exactly. It's about finding those points of intersection between Anya's personal and professional life and showing how those intersections influence her romantic choices.
Now let's shift our focus to Ben. One excerpt mentions him getting a job offer in LA. That's a big deal. How can the writer use this move to create tension and opportunities for growth in Ben's character arc?
Moving to a new city can be a catalyst for change, especially for someone like Ben, who seems driven by ambition and a need for control. Will he thrive in the fast-paced environment of LA, or will he struggle to adapt? How will his move affect his relationship with Anya? Will it strengthen their bond, or will the distance create cracks in their foundation?
And how will his alpha male tendencies play out in a city known for its cutthroat competition? Will he soften and learn to prioritize his personal life, or will he double down on his ambition?
These are all great questions that the writer can explore. Ben's move to LA offers a chance to challenge his worldview, force him to confront his vulnerabilities, and potentially learn some valuable lessons about love, success, and what truly matters in life.
Okay, we've talked a lot about Anya and Ben, but what about Lily? She's described as Anya's roommate and co-worker, but we don't have a lot of information about her character. What are some ways the writer can develop her role in the story and make her more than just a supporting character?
Lily has the potential to be a fantastic foil to Anya. They share similar ambitions and fears, but their approaches to life might be completely different. Perhaps Lily is more pragmatic and cautious, while Anya is more idealistic and willing to take risks.
Maybe Lily is the voice of reason, the one who keeps Anya grounded when her head is in the clouds. Or maybe she's the one who encourages Anya to step outside her comfort zone and pursue her dreams.
Exactly. Lily can challenge Anya's perspective, offer a different point of view, and even provide some much-needed comic relief. She can also be a source of support and guidance as Anya navigates the complexities of her love life and career.
Now let's not forget about David. He's the oldest and most successful of the group, and he's described as having a bit of a reputation. How can the writer make him more than just a stereotypical older man figure?
David needs depth and dimension. What are his motivations beyond success and power? What are his insecurities? What does he see in Anya that makes her stand out from the crowd? Maybe he's tired of the superficiality of the LA scene and is drawn to Anya's authenticity and passion. Or maybe he's looking for a connection that goes beyond the boardroom, someone who challenges him intellectually and emotionally.
It's like he's looking for something more meaningful than just another conquest. He wants a partner, not just a trophy.
Exactly. And that desire for a genuine connection can make him a more relatable and sympathetic character, even with the age gap and power dynamic at play. The writer needs to show us his vulnerabilities, his longing for something real, and how Anya awakens those feelings in him.
Okay, we've talked about each character individually, but what about the dynamics between them? We've already touched on the potential love triangle between Anya, Ben, and David, but what other relationships are worth exploring?
The friendship between Anya and Lily is a goldmine of potential. They share a living space, a workplace, and a deep understanding of each other's struggles. They can offer each other support advice and even some healthy competition. Their conversations could provide valuable insight into their individual journeys and how they influence each other's choices.
It's like they're each other's cheerleaders, but they're not afraid to call each other out when needed.
Exactly. A strong female friendship can add so much depth and complexity to a romance novel. It's a reminder that love doesn't have to be romantic to be powerful and transformative.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground, but I want to circle back to the issue of the inconsistent timeline and locations in the source material. You mentioned that it can be confusing for the reader. What are some ways the writer can address this problem?
Clarity is key. The writer needs to establish a clear and consistent timeline, making sure the reader understands when and where each event is happening. If there are flashbacks or time jumps, they need to be clearly signposted. The same goes for locations. If Anya is constantly bouncing between LA, London, and New York, there needs to be a logical reason for her travels, and the transitions need to be smooth and understandable.
So it's like creating a roadmap for the reader so they don't get lost along the way.
Exactly. A well-structured narrative will allow the reader to focus on the characters and their relationships without getting bogged down in confusion about the timeline or setting.
Okay, we've talked about the characters, their relationships, the setting, and the importance of a clear narrative structure. But what about those all-important sparks of attraction? How can the writer create chemistry between the characters that leaps off the page?
Chemistry is all about showing, not telling. It's about those stolen glances, the lingering touches, the witty banter that crackles with unspoken tension. It's about creating moments where the characters are acutely aware of each other, even in a crowded room.
So it's not just about saying they felt a spark, it's about creating those sensory details that make the reader feel the heat between them.
Exactly. Think about the way they look at each other, the way their voices change when they're talking to each other, the way their bodies react in close proximity.
Maybe their hands brush accidentally, or they share a meaningful look across a crowded room, or they find themselves laughing a little too loudly at each other's jokes.
Those little details are what make the romance come alive. They create that sense of anticipation, that feeling that something is about to happen, and that keeps the reader hooked.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but I feel like we're just scratching the surface. Before we move on to the final part where we'll wrap up our analysis and offer some concluding thoughts, is there anything else you'd like to add about the potential of this story?
I think the writer has a lot of great material to work with. The characters are compelling, the setting is ripe with possibilities, and the themes of ambition, love, and social justice have the potential to resonate deeply with readers. With a little more focus on structure and clarity and a lot of attention to those subtle details that create chemistry and emotional depth, this story could be a real winner.
So we've really gotten into the weeds with this story, and I think our listener has a lot to think about as they continue to develop their draft. But before we wrap things up, are there any other key takeaways or pieces of advice that you think are crucial for writing a compelling contemporary romance?
I think one thing that's often overlooked is the importance of pacing.
Hmm.
We talked about that accelerated timeline in some of the excerpts.
Right, like Anya and Ben holding hands on their first walk together.
Yeah, exactly. That can work, but the writer needs to be mindful of how quickly the relationship is progressing. We need to see that emotional connection build organically, even if the physical attraction is immediate.
So it's not just about checking boxes like first kiss, first date, first I love you. It's about making sure those moments feel earned and believable.
Exactly. And that goes for all aspects of the story,
Hmm.
not just the romance. The characters' careers, their personal struggles, their friendships, all of these elements need to unfold at a pace that feels natural and engaging for the reader.
So it's like finding the right rhythm for the story, the right tempo that keeps the reader hooked but doesn't rush them through the important moments.
Exactly. And that rhythm can vary depending on the genre and the specific story you're telling, but it's something that the writer needs to be acutely aware of as they're crafting the narrative.
Now, we've talked a lot about structure and pacing and character development, but what about the actual writing itself? Do you have any advice for our listener on how to make their prose sing?
Oh gosh, well that's a big question.
Hmm.
I think the most important thing is to find your voice. That unique style that sets you apart from other writers?
So it's not just about writing grammatically correct sentences, it's about writing sentences that have personality, that capture the essence of your characters and your story.
Exactly. And that takes practice and experimentation. Don't be afraid to try different things, to play with language, to break the rules if it serves the story.
So don't be afraid to be bold, to be creative, to let your imagination run wild.
Exactly. And the more you write, the more you'll develop that confidence and that distinctive voice that will make your writing stand out.
And remember, our listener, you don't have to do this alone. There are writing communities, workshops, online resources, all sorts of ways to connect with other writers and get feedback on your work.
Absolutely. Writing can be a solitary pursuit, but it doesn't have to be. Surround yourself with people who support your passion and who will challenge you to grow as a writer.
Well, expert speaker, this has been such a fascinating and insightful deep dive into the world of contemporary romance. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us and with our listener.
The pleasure was all mine. And to our listener, I want to say keep writing, keep dreaming, and keep believing in the power of your story, because the world needs your voice.
That's a beautiful sentiment. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, happy reading and happy writing.